The Kremlin launched a sweeping and aggressive series of retaliatory action against the United States and its key allies, signaling a dramatic and perilous escalation in the long simmering conflict over Ukraine. In a coordinated wave of economic, diplomatic, and digital attacks, Moscow made it clear that it would not absorb the latest round of punishing American sanctions without inflicting significant pain in return. The moves, announced through various government ministries over the course of a tense day, appeared designed to target the specific economic and political interests of the Trump administration, creating a direct challenge to Washington's new foreign policy and its leadership. The response was not a single act, but a multi-front assault, demonstrating a breadth and depth of planning that sent immediate shockwaves through global markets and diplomatic channels. Russian officials, speaking with a unified and defined voice, framed their actions not as an escalation but as a necessary and justified response to what they termed unprecedented economic warfare waged by the United States. The Kremlin's message was unambiguous. For every action Washington takes, Moscow is prepared to answer with a disproportionate and painful reaction. Regardless of the consequence for the global order, the most immediate and impactful of Russia's counter-sanctions came from its economic ministry, which took direct aim at the heart of American finance and commerce. In a move that stunned Wall Street, Russia's central bank announced the immediate freezing of all assets held by American domicile investment funds, private equity firms, and financial services corporations operating within the Russian Federation. This measure effectively traps billions of dollars of American capital, preventing repatriation and rendering these vast sums illiquid. The order impacts some of the largest names in American finance, turning profitable long-term investments into stranded assets overnight. Spokesperson for the Russian Finance Ministry explained the action in stark terms, stating that any nation's waging economic war cannot expect its own financial interests to remain safe within Russian territory. The policy was seen by international observers as a direct shot at the background of the new United States Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, a former hedge fund executive whose career was built within the very industry now being targeted. While his former firm had divested from Russia a year prior, the move was symbolic, intended to demonstrate that the Kremlin understands the pressure points of the American financial system and is not afraid to press on them. The implications were vast. A major American investment bank with a significant Moscow office, for example, found itself suddenly unable to access its own operating accounts within Russia, leaving its local employees in limbo and its multi-million-dollar portfolio in a state of paralysis. This was not a subtle diplomatic signal. It was a brutal and direct economic blow. This financial assault was complemented by a series of targeted trade measures overseen by Russia's Ministry of Industry and Trade, seemingly crafted to create maximum disruption for key American sectors. Russia declared a complete ban on the importation and use of specific categories of American enterprise software, particularly in the field of financial management, logistics, and data analytics. This move forced major Russian industries from banking to resource extraction to hastily find alternatives, but its primary purpose was to hurt major U.S. technology corporations, specifically carved out in the announcement target financial data platform, a niche but highly profitable sectors of the American tech economy. The policy was widely interpreted as a target measure against the interests represented by United States Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick, whose own background is deeply enmeshed in financial technology and trading platforms. For an American software company that had spent a decade building its client base in Russia, the decree meant the immediate cancellation of all contract and the effective erasure of its market presence. Russian state television aired segments highlighting domestically produced software alternatives, casting the move as a step toward technological sovereignty and a break from dependence on American systems. The agricultural sector, a cornerstone of the American economy and a politically sensitive area for the Trump administration, was also hit hard. Russia's agricultural oversight body, Roselnadzor announced a full and indefinite embargo on all American poultry, soybean, and corn imports, citing alleged phytosanitary concerns. This justification was dismissed by international trade bodies as a transparent pretext for a politically motivated trade barrier. The decision strikes directly at the American heartland, impacting farmers and agricultural conglomerates in states that are politically vital for a farming cooperative in the Midwest. This means that massive grain shipments intended for the Russian markets are now effectively worthless, creating a logistical and financial nightmare. The supply chain effect is immediate, impacting everything from grain elevators to shipping companies that rely on the steady streams of export. The move puts direct pressure on the U.S. Department of Agriculture and its new head, Secretary Brooke Rollins, to manage the fallout and find alternative markets for a massive surplus of goods that can no longer be sold to a primary customer. Russian officials made no secret of their intent, with one parliamentarian stating on a popular talk show that if American politicians want to harm the Russian economy, they should first be prepared to answer to their own farmers who will pay the price. On the diplomatic front, the response was equally severe. The Russian Foreign Ministry, led by the veteran diplomat Sergei Lavrov, summoned the U.S. ambassador to its headquarters in Moscow and handed him a diplomatic note declaring 75 American diplomatic personnel persona non grata. The individuals, a mix of diplomat technical staff and administrative personnel from the U.S. Embassy in Moscow and consulate in other cities, were given a 72-hour deadline to leave the country. Such a mass expulsion is one of the most severe diplomatic punishment possible short of severing ties completely. It cripples the functionality of the U.S. diplomatic mission, severely limiting its ability to conduct consular services, gather information, and engage in the day-to-day work of diplomacy. The move was a direct tit for tat for an early American expulsion of Russian diplomats, but the scale was significantly larger, designed to send a message of dominance. In a televised statement, Foreign Minister Lavrov accused the expelled personnel of activities incompatible with their diplomatic status, a common euphemism for espionage. He further announced that Russia was recalling its own ambassador from Washington for urgent consultations, a move that signals a deep freeze in high-level communication and a profound crisis in bilateral relations. The Kremlin's offensive extended into the shadowy realm of cyberspace. Over a 12-hour period, a wide area of American government and commercial websites were targeted by sophisticated and sustained denial-of-service attacks. While these attacks do not steal data, they are designed to overwhelm and paralyze, flooding servers with junk traffic to the point where they become inaccessible to legitimate users. The websites of several major port authorities, key federal agencies, and a handful of prominent financial news outlets were intermittently forced offline. The disruption was significant enough to prompt an alert from the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which falls under the purview of the Department of Homeland Security. The new Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, was forced to issue a public statement advising all critical infrastructure operators and private sector partners to elevate their security posture to the highest level. While direct attribution in cyberspace is notoriously difficult, the timing, scale, and targets of the attack led U.S. intelligence agencies to assess with high confidence that they were orchestrated by hacking groups affiliated with Russian intelligence services. Directors of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard and CIA Director John Ratcliffe were reportedly preparing a full briefing for President Trump on the extent of the digital assault. The attack served as a powerful reminder of Russia's asymmetric capabilities, its ability to sow chaos and disruption within the United States without firing a single shot. It was a form of modern warfare, a demonstration that the battlefield now extends to the digital infrastructure that underpins American daily life. Military posturing, accompanied by the other measures, adding a dangerous physical dimension to the escalating crisis. The Russian Ministry of Defense announced a series of snap readiness drills in strategic locations bordering NATO territory. In Kaliningrad, the heavily militarized Russian enclave nestled between Poland and Lithuania. Thousands of troops, accompanied by armored vehicle and missile systems, were mobilized for live fire exercise. Simultaneously, the Russian Northern Fleet began large-scale naval maneuvers in the Barents Sea, and Air Force patrols increased their activity over the Baltic Sea, in some cases flying close to the airspace of NATO members. These military movements forced a response from the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which placed its Rapid Response Force on a higher state of alert. The Pentagon, under the leadership of Secretary of Defense Peter Hegseth, confirmed that it was repositioning assets in Europe to monitor the Russian drills. A Pentagon spokesperson issued a terse statement calling the Russian exercise unhelpful and destabilizing, while emphasizing that U.S. forces were ready to defend every inch of NATO territory. The drill served a dual purpose for Moscow: to intimidate its immediate neighbors and to force the United States and its allies into a costly and tense defense posture, diverting attention and resources. It was a classic Russian strategy of calculated brinkmanship designed to test the resolve and reaction time of the new American administration and its military leadership. The initial reaction from the White House was one of defiance. Spokesperson stated that President Trump would not be intimidated by what they called the Kremlin's predictable and desperate tactics. The official statement reiterated that the American sanctions were a direct consequence of Russian aggression in Ukraine, and that any economic pain felt in the United States as a result of Russian retaliation would only strengthen American resolve. The president, the statement continued, was in close consultation with his national security team, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who was tasked with coordinating the diplomatic response with key allies. However, behind this public facade of strength, the sheer scope of the Russian counteroffensive created a complex and urgent crisis. The economic measures were already rattling market, the diplomatic expulsion were undermining communication channels, and the cyber and military activities create a palpable sense of risk. Moscow had not just responded, it had thrown down a gauntlet, fundamentally challenging the Trump administration's strategy. The day's event made it clear that the conflict was no longer a distant proxy war in Eastern Europe. Through its multifaceted and aggressive retaliation, Moscow had brought the confrontation directly to America's doorstep, turning it into a direct test of wills between two nuclear-armed powers. The world now watches and waits to see not if, but how Washington will respond to a rival that has just declared it is willing to absorb any punishment and hit back even harder. Many of my listeners, like 70%, haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel. And so many of you don't even know that you haven't subscribed. And that is actually what makes the show going. It's almost like you're making a donation to the show. So that's why I ask again and again. Because it enables us to grow and grow and grow. And we're going for the long haul here. And listen, if this is your first time listening to Sok Heinrich, you don't have to subscribe. You guys, your first one's on me. But if you haven't watched this show before, it's like you're a freeloader now. So all I would ask you is, if you have seen this show before and you like it, help me, help my team here. Now hit that subscribe and like button, and we will continue to build the show for you. That I promise. Thank you to all of you guys who have subscribed. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much. That's all for me for today. I will see you soon.